Welcome to episode 5 of the creative process, hair metal. From DI to awesome bass tone in 4 steps. Today, we're going to turn this into this. I told you to use an amp. I don't have an amp, and we don't need one. If you used an amp, the bass would already sound good. I would still have processing to do on it. Oh yeah, moving a slider up and down is just so hard. But first, Angry Orchard. It's like apple juice for the over 21. The sections in today's video are the 4 steps. Use a blender. Pick your boomer. You have an accent. Spice it up. Revisit those mistakes we held on to in episode 3. In the mix, where we hear the processed bass in the mix of the whole song. Remember to check out the descriptions for links that'll take you to each one of these individual sections, as well as links to some other videos and any of the plugins and products that we use in today's show. The 4 steps. Use the blender. First thing we want to do is take our 3 bass tones and blend them using volume and panning, and also determine which ones we want to use if we don't want to use them all. Pick your boomer. Add an amp sim. What's the first plugin thingy you're using again? An amp simulator. I thought you didn't need an amp. I don't need an actual amp because I have amp simulators in my DAW. A real amp would have sounded better and been easier. I don't have a bass amp. Well, then maybe you should get one. You have an accent. This is where we're going to add the effects to the accent track and get the tone of the accent track. Spice it up, which unfortunately has nothing to do with the Spice Girls. We're going to add the effects to the main bass bus, as well as possibly to the main bass channels. So let's use the blender. We're going to go over 2 methods to accomplish this. The first method is when you actually have multiple sources, as we do. So the first thing we've done, if you look down here, is I've soloed the bass bus. It's at unity, center panned, and all of the effects are turned off. And if we go out and look at the individual bass tracks, they're also center panned at unity, and the one that has effects on it, they are turned off. This is what that sounds like. What we want to do is get a blend on these 3 microphones without adding any effects that's as close to the final sound as we can get. So the first thing we're going to do is go through and see what each one sounds like on its own. This one is the closest to the sound I want. This one isn't too far off. And that is a blend I'm happy with. Let's hear how that sounds in the whole mix. This panning that we did on these two tracks, that just makes the bass fill up a little more space. I think you probably heard that when I was doing it.
What do you mean take up more space? Are you saying I sound thin?
No, just that you can fill more space in the mix.
Well, it wouldn't be a problem if I recorded with an amp.
I would still have to use panning and stereo imaging to make you fill more room in the mix.
Oh, it'd fill the room if I had an amp to use.
Not on the recording.
Pardon my French, but you're an asshole.
It's important that you have multiple sources on all your instruments. Anytime you only use one channel for an instrument, it very quickly and very easily starts to sound thin in the mix. So if I really only recorded one signal from the bass, or only one of the signals I recorded from the bass was usable, I would use busing in order to split that out into multiple channels, multiple tracks, so that I could manipulate them individually and get a fuller sound out of that bass. This is especially true because of the style of music we're mixing here. The bass needs to be big. It needs to be in your face. So if I only had one source for the bass, this is what I would do. I would take that original source and I would send it out to 3 buses. I would do this pre-pan, pre-slider, and I would turn the slider all the way down, and that way I didn't have any of this in the master mix. Or I might just uncheck the box for send to the master. Either way, I'm going to drop that original source out of the master, and I'm going to have these 3 buses that are all the original source. Then I can use EQ and other effects to make them all sound slightly different. One trick I can use is I can put one of them on a very short, like a 15 or a 20 millisecond delay, and that'll make it sound like 2 separate performances. But basically, I can do everything that I'm doing with these 3 sources with those 3 buses. It will sound better if I have 3 separate performances, 3 separate recordings, 3 slightly different tones. But I can do it with one original source. Then I would take those 3 buses and send them to a summed bus, kind of like the way I have my 3 bass sources all sent into a bus now. And that would allow me to sound like I had multiple sources even though I only had one source on the bass. This track right here I'm calling my accent track. It has the tone that's farthest from the actual tone that I want, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay some effects on that track that basically destroy it. They're going to make it so that you wouldn't want to hear that tone. But then I'm going to lay that tone in, I'm going to undermix that tone in with my main bass tones, and what it'll do is it'll just fill out some of the high end and some of the places that they're missing. It'll also serve to put a little hair on them, and with what I'm going to do to this track, I'll be able to reverb this track without it getting muddy too. If we listen to just the bass and drums, and I turn the accent track on and off, you'll be able to hear it coming out of the mix. Here, give it a listen. And that's without even having any effects on it. Now that we're done with the blender, it's time to pick your boomer. Using the right amp sim is very important. I actually have 3 in here that I'm going to play through for you, and then I'll tell you which one I want to use. Your amp and your cab go a really long way to determining your tone. So it's important that you lay in the one that gets you as close as possible. If you noticed, I'm doing the amp sim on the whole bass bus because I want the bass to sound like an instrument. So I'm only going to amp it one time.
Seriously? You need to try 3 different amps?
Options are a good thing.
Well, if I had an amp, you could have just used my tone.
But then I wouldn't be able to pick the tone that fits the mix best.
One of those isn't even an amp.
It works like one.
Can I have an option on which mix engineer I want to use?
So the first bass sim that I want to show you is the bass grinder with the Dragon sim and the Razor cab. Just to refresh your memory, here it is without the amp sim. Here it is with the amp sim. The next amp sim isn't actually an amp sim, it's a bass overdrive pedal, but it works up like a preamp, so I want to demonstrate that one for you. And the last one is the SHB1 from Ignite Amps. The one that I like best for this song is the bass grinder. And here it is in the whole mix. Now it's time to give it an accent. The accent track is more missed than it's heard. What I mean by that is when you drop it out of the mix, you're like, the bass is missing something. But when it's in the mix, it just makes the bass sound good and you don't really hear specifically that track.
Check this out. I spent a whole bunch of time doing something you can't even hear.
You hear it when it's not there.
Maybe I'll be able to hear you if you're not here.
Don't be an ass.
So you wouldn't let me play through an amp, but I'm the problem?
I'm gonna solo the accent track and show you the effects that I have on it, and then I'm gonna drop it in the mix so you can hear it there. The first thing we did was put a splitter on it. I took all the frequencies below 300 hertz and put them on one channel, and all the frequencies 300 hertz and above and put them on another channel. I then turned the volume completely down on the lower channel, so you're only hearing the bass frequencies 300 hertz and above on this channel. I used 300 hertz because that's where your very small speakers like smartphones, tablets, computers start being able to reproduce the sound. So on those devices, this is really the main track you're going to hear. Here is what it sounds like with no effects. Here is what it sounds like when you're only hearing the frequencies at 300 hertz and above. Then I took the pulsar smasher and put it in there. I put the input all the way up at like 88% and the output at about 68% and the mix at 100%, so you're not getting any raw signal. Here it is one more time without the smasher. And here it is with the smasher. Since I killed those low frequencies, we can add an ambient reverb to this track and it won't mud out. Here it is one more time without the reverb. And here it is with the reverb. Sounds pretty bad, right? Here it is with the other two bass channels. Now let me turn it on and off so you can hear it falling in and out. Pretty big difference, huh? And this is the whole mix. Now that we're done giving our bass an accent, it's time to spice it up. If you noticed, I had a couple other effects in here that are still turned off. I got a compressor and a chorus.
Quit changing my sound!
I'm sculpting the tone so it sounds better in the mix.
Well, the ladies don't like it when I play for them and it sounds different than the record.
What women?
My groupies.
Oh, you mean...
Ma, thank God you're here.
Arrested for prostitution. I can't believe it. Sophia, we're innocent. I know that. I can't believe these dumb cops would think anyone would pay money to sleep with you.
This is the bass tone we have right now. This is the bass tone with compression. This is the bass tone with compression and chorus. Here's the bass and drums together. And here it is in the whole mix. That's it. 4 steps and we got our bass tone. If you remember from episode 2, we saved a couple mistakes. We said we'd come back and look at them when we got our bass tone. Let's go take a look at them. The first one's in measure 78. One of the basses slides into the first note. Let's just give it a quick listen. We're going to listen to the measure before and the measure after so that we can hear that measure in context. Sounded fine to me, staying in there. The next one was measure 90. One of the runs was really sloppy. So here, let's give a listen to 89, 90, and 91. That one also sounded fine to me, it's staying in there. Now let's hear it in mix. So what do you think? Is it starting to sound like hair metal? Let me know in the comments below. Come back next week when we get that acoustic tone. Don't forget, like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell so we can let you know about future uploads. Until next week, stay happy, stay healthy, and God bless. Have a great week, everybody.